Listen closely. What I'm about to tell you was never meant for your ears. In the winter of 1863, as snow buried the Tennessee hills in silence, a line of men and women was led through the storm shackled not by chains, but by something worse. Contracts, wages, the illusion of choice. They vanished into a red brick fortress on Bledsoe Creek, a cotton mill glowing with unnatural firelight. By morning, only the storm remained. The people were gone. Their names, erased in black ink from the company ledgers. Their bodies never found. 73 in total. 73 human beings swallowed whole by the Chamberlain Dynasty's hunger for fortune and power. You've heard of southern plantations, of slave labor, of war profiteering. But this was something different. Something darker. A system of disappearance and silence. Hidden beneath the prosperity of America's industrial rise. A dynasty built not just on cotton, but on unmarked graves buried beneath its own foundation. Graves that whisper in the soil, graves that funded the wealth of 3 generations, graves that bought the Chamberlains a seat in the halls of power. Think about that. The shirts on soldiers' backs, the canvas that covered their wagons, the very fabric of the Union Army's advance, all laced with invisible blood. And not the blood of the battlefield, the blood of workers who simply ceased to exist. Historians call it a mystery. Locals call it a curse. But here's the truth. The Chamberlains weren't just businessmen. They were engineers of control. They understood that the most powerful way to own a man isn't with shackles, it's with promises. They lured the desperate with wages, housing, stability in a world shattered by war. Then they erased them, efficiently, silently, without consequence. The evidence sat buried for over a century in a sealed vault beneath the mill. Ledgers inked with vanished names. Production records spiking with every disappearance. Private correspondence describing sacrifices necessary for continuity. When the vault was pried open in 1987, the Chamberlain heirs fought tooth and nail to suppress it. But truth, like a body left too shallow, always rises. And you're about to descend with me into it. Understand this. Once you know the Chamberlain secret, you cannot unknow it. Their story isn't just about Tennessee in 1863. It's about the machinery of human control, the same patterns repeating across time, across institutions, across nations. 73 souls, 73 shadows, and the dynasty that turned them into profit. The storm has only just begun. Picture the scene. Tennessee, 1862. A state torn apart by war. Confederate money worthless. Farms raided by both armies. Families starving. It was a world where desperation hung heavier than the winter fog. And into this chaos walked Jeremiah Chamberlain, a man with silver hair at 28, steel-gray eyes, and a voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. He came from Massachusetts, carrying with him not only knowledge of northern mills but letters from Union quartermasters promising contracts if he could deliver cloth, uniforms, and canvas. He looked like salvation, but salvation always comes with a price. The town of Gallatin welcomed him. His money funded construction, his promises gave men work, his housing seemed generous. Newspapers praised his progressive employment model. While other mills shuttered or relied on broken labor forces, Chamberlain's red fortress blazed day and night with productivity. His profits soared. His name spread. But the more his wealth grew, the less anyone saw of the people who earned it. Families arrived at his mill, stayed in his company housing, then dissolved like smoke. Neighbors noticed oddities. The postmaster observed that no one in Chamberlain housing ever sent or received letters. The town's doctor admitted he had never been called once to treat a worker strange in a world where factory wounds and lung sickness were unavoidable. And a boy, just 12 years old, watching from his farm on the edge of the property, swore he saw wagons rolling out at night, wagons heavy with wrapped bundles, heading toward the river under the cover of darkness, always returning empty by dawn. People whispered but said nothing. Why? Because Chamberlain brought money. He brought employment. He brought federal contracts when the community was starving. To question him seemed unpatriotic, even dangerous. And so silence ruled. But silence is the mask of power. And Jeremiah Chamberlain wielded silence like a weapon. His control wasn't maintained by chains or whips, it was maintained by gratitude, by dependence, by fear of losing the one man who seemed to make survival possible. And behind that mask of benevolence, 73 lives vanished without burial, without memory, without justice. This is how dynasties are built. Not through innovation or brilliance, but through manipulation, through control, through turning the suffering of others into the fuel of empire. The first crack in the Chamberlain mask came not from a whistleblower, not from a rival, but from a storm. February 14, 1863. The worst blizzard in Tennessee's living memory. For 3 days, snow and ice sealed the countryside in silence. Roads impassable. Telegraph lines snapped. Fires burned low in every farmhouse as families rationed their wood. Work ceased across the region except at the Chamberlain mill. From his window, young Caleb Craven watched through a spyglass as lights burned in the factory all night long. Men and women moved like shadows past the windows, though no smoke rose from the worker housing nearby. No families stoked their fires. No children played in the snow. The houses stood dark, empty, silent. On the second night, Caleb saw something that would haunt him for life. Procession. Men and women led by armed guards across the frozen yard, toward a storage shed behind the mill. They carried bundles, perhaps their belongings, perhaps something else. Their movements were slow, reluctant, almost resigned. The snow swallowed their footsteps, the storm their voices. Then the door closed. By dawn they were gone. No wagons left that morning. No figures emerged. The shed, when Caleb dared approach weeks later, smelled faintly of iron and rot. But he was just a boy. Who would believe him? His father dismissed his fears. They probably moved on, he said. But Caleb knew. They hadn't moved anywhere. The Chamberlain Mill's records for that week? Record-breaking production. Cloth shipments triple the normal amount. Cotton transformed not just into fabric but into gold. Wealth extracted from silence and disappearance. And on that same ledger page, names crossed out. 17 gone in 1 week. No deaths reported. No families accounted for. The storm revealed what ordinary days concealed. That the Chamberlains had constructed something far darker than a mill. They had built a system of erasure. Why erase? Why not simply work men until they collapsed like so many other factories of the era? The answer lies in power psychology. The Chamberlains weren't just exploiting labor. They were experimenting with control itself. The disappearances weren't an accident of cruelty, they were deliberate, ritualistic, synchronized with production highs. Every vanishing coincided with profit spikes. Every death translated into greater efficiency. Jeremiah Chamberlain's private correspondence letters locked away in that sealed basement vault make it clear. He wrote of the necessity of pruning weak stock, of harvesting resilience from the compliant. Words cold as a scalpel, written by a man who believed he was perfecting not just business but humanity itself. The 73 weren't just workers. They were test subjects in a hidden system. Some may have been worked to death. Others may have been silenced because they asked questions, broke the illusion, threatened the facade. And some, this is the most chilling possibility, may have been sacrificed in ways that had nothing to do with cotton at all. The shed Caleb saw wasn't just storage. In the soil around it, decades later, archaeologists found traces of ash, charred bone fragments, residues not consistent with livestock. 73 unmarked graves were never found because the Chamberlains ensured there would be no graves. Only disappearance. Only silence. And this, my friend, is the lesson. Power does not tolerate loose ends. Those who question the system vanish. Those who refuse to submit are erased. And the majority, terrified, keep working, keep feeding the machine, grateful to still exist. You think this story is just about 1863? No. This is how power still functions today. In every corporation that discards its people like numbers, in every government that buries its mistakes, in every institution that consumes lives for profit while the ledgers balance higher. The Chamberlains were not unique. They were pioneers. When the war ended in 1865, Tennessee was broken. But the Chamberlains were not. Their wealth had multiplied. Their contracts with the Union Army had forged political alliances that lasted decades. They became donors, power brokers, eventually senators. Their fortune built schools, railroads, even churches. They were praised as philanthropists. No one asked where the seed money came from. This is how history rewrites itself. The graves vanish, but the mansions remain. The cries fade, but the foundations hold. And over time, power launders its own sins until what began in blood ends in marble halls and oil portraits. But documents don't lie. The ledgers uncovered in 1987 told a story too neat to ignore. 73 names gone. 73 spikes in profit. 73 shadows beneath the dynasty's rise. The Chamberlain heirs fought desperately to suppress it. They claimed the workers moved away. They claimed records were misfiled. But forensic handwriting experts confirmed the erasures were deliberate. Black ink layered over original names. Calculated. Controlled. And so we face a truth more disturbing than murder. We face the reality of institutionalized disappearance. Of human lives fed into an economic system like fuel into a furnace. Their erasure covered by the glow of prosperity. This is the Chamberlain legacy. This is the shadow beneath the Cotton Empire. But why does this matter now? Why tell this story? Because the system hasn't ended. It has evolved. The Chamberlains were an early chapter in a book that has never closed. Their methods, silence, disappearance, profit through erasure echo today in ways you feel but rarely name. Think of the jobs where people vanish overnight, laid off by email, their names erased from systems as if they never existed. Think of soldiers lost to wars justified by contracts and resources, their stories buried, their graves anonymous. Think of institutions that thrive on forgetting that rise on silence. Jeremiah Chamberlain understood something most men never will. Control is not about force. It's about erasure. If a man disappears and no one remembers him, his life has no consequence. If his absence fuels profit, he becomes an invisible resource. And if an entire society learns to ignore the missing, then power has achieved its perfect design. The Chamberlains were architects of that design. And whether you realize it or not, you are still living inside the house they built. You may wonder, what of the families of the 73? Did no one demand justice? Some did. Whispers survived. Mothers who came searching. Brothers who demanded wages owed. But all were met with silence, dismissal, or subtle threats. The Chamberlains had wealth, connections, and the protection of a system eager to believe in their benevolence. And here lies another lesson. When a lie is profitable, it becomes truth. The newspapers praised Chamberlain as a savior. The churches blessed him as a provider. The politicians embraced him as a patriot. To challenge him was to challenge the prosperity he delivered. And so the truth was buried, layer by layer, under gratitude, fear, and complicity. Understand, this power doesn't need to hide its crimes. It only needs to convince you that exposing them would be worse than silence. And most people, terrified of losing what little they have, choose silence. This is how dynasties endure. Not because they are strong, but because others choose to forget. Let us step back. Why 73? Why not more? Why not fewer? Patterns reveal purpose. In Jeremiah's private papers, scholars found strange references to cycles, seasons of harvest, intervals of correction. He wrote like a man performing rituals, not running a factory. And perhaps he was. The Chamberlains were not merely chasing profit. They were practicing control as a sacrament. 73 is not an accident, it is a number woven into the rhythm of their rise. Some believe they chose it deliberately, mirroring biblical references to 7 times 70, and the cycle of forgiveness, twisted into a cycle of erasure. Others suggest they were mapping their disappearances to production schedules, turning human lives into a kind of offering to efficiency. Whatever the truth, know this: dynasties operate on numbers, not souls. They balance ledgers of flesh and profit, graves and gold, until the two blur into one. Pause here. Ask yourself, why are you still listening? Because some part of you knows this story is not just about the past. It is about you, about the system you live inside, about the unmarked graves beneath your own life, the forgotten workers, the discarded men, the vanished who fuel the comforts you take for granted. This is the descent, and I need you to mark it. Right now, comment these words below. I will not be erased. I will not be erased. Do it twice. Speak it into the algorithm. Lock it into your mind. Seal your refusal to vanish, your refusal to be swallowed like the 73. Because this story is not entertainment. It is initiation. The Chamberlain Dynasty did not stop with Jeremiah. His son, Richard, expanded the empire into railroads and banking. His grandson, Edward, entered politics, elected on the promise of progress. Their money built libraries, hospitals, and universities. Today, their descendants sit on boards, fund campaigns, host charity galas. They are praised as leaders, benefactors, visionaries. Few remember or dare speak of the 73 who vanished into their foundation. This is how dynasties survive centuries. By laundering blood into philanthropy. By transforming silence into legacy. By writing their own histories while the graves remain unmarked. The Chamberlains are no different from Rockefellers, Carnegies, Morgans. Every dynasty has its shadows. Every fortune is built on someone else's disappearance. But the Chamberlains left us something most others did not. Evidence. Ledgers. Letters. Whispers that refuse to die. And in those whispers, a warning. Every system built on erasure eventually consumes those who forget. Think of the cotton itself. White, pure, soft. The symbol of prosperity. But every bale from the Chamberlain mill was soaked in invisible stains. Soldiers marched in uniforms woven from silence. Families covered their wagons with canvas bought at the cost of vanished lives. The South rebuilt itself on a commodity cursed by 73 souls. And cotton is just one thread in the larger fabric of history. Every empire has its crop, its resource, its commodity of blood. Sugar in the Caribbean. Rubber in the Congo. Oil in the Middle East. The product changes, but the method remains. Take, erase, profit, repeat. The Chamberlains were not monsters outside the system. They were the system condensed into one family. And in studying them, we study the very mechanics of power itself. There are stories of haunting. Locals speak of whispers on cold nights near the ruins of the mill. Of figures glimpsed along the creek. Of a boy who grew to manhood swearing he still heard wagons in the night. But hauntings are only symbols. The real ghost is silence. The real curse is forgetting. For every Chamberlain dynasty that thrives, there are dozens of families who vanish from history. Their names erased. Their lives reduced to nothing more than profit spikes in a ledger. That is the true haunting of America. Not spirits, but silence. Not curses, but control. And when you see this clearly, you realize the Chamberlains never disappeared. They live on in every system that consumes lives and buries truth. Ask yourself, what would you have done in 1863? Would you have spoken out? Or would you, like the town doctor, like the postmaster, like Caleb's father, chosen silence? Most men believe they are brave until survival demands complicity. And then, like the people of Gallatin, they turn their heads, rationalize, and move on. But here's the key. Once you see the system, you cannot return to blindness. You are forced to choose. To remain silent or to speak. To accept erasure or to resist it. That is the true weight of forbidden history. It doesn't just inform you, it transforms you. The Chamberlains built their empire on the belief that most men would stay silent. Prove them wrong. The final descent. 73 shadows, erased for cotton and profit. A dynasty rising on their silence. A town complicit. A nation that turned away. And yet the pattern repeats. Again and again. The Chamberlains were not exceptional, they were exemplary. They showed how power operates. Erase, profit, expand, legitimize, repeat. Look around you now. See the echoes. See the disappearances hidden beneath new names, new industries, new dynasties. The system has grown more subtle, but no less ruthless. If anything, it has perfected itself. And here is the truth. You are either fuel for the system or you are something else. The question is, will you vanish like the 73? Or will you resist erasure? This is the end of the descent. The Chamberlain mill stands no longer, its bricks collapsed, its machines rusted, its dynasty scattered into modern institutions that wear philanthropy as a mask. But beneath the soil of Tennessee, the silence remains. 73 shadows whisper in unmarked graves, reminders that every fortune carries a debt, every dynasty its ghosts. You have heard what you were never meant to hear, and now you must decide. Do you forget, like Gallatin? You've heard what you were never meant to hear. 73 souls vanished, their silence fueling a dynasty that still echoes today. And now the question is not about them. It's about you. Will you remain silent, or will you speak? Type these words below twice. I will not be erased. I will not be erased. Every comment is not just engagement. It's defiance. It's proof that you refuse to vanish like the 73. If this descent opened your eyes, then subscribe, because the deeper we go, the harder it is to climb back out. And trust me, this was only the first layer. The next stories cut even deeper into the systems that control you. Join me. Don't just watch, become part of the circle of men who refuse silence. The ones who see, the ones who know, the ones who cannot be erased.